Hello and welcome to Waylander's Wandering. Today I'm going to be showing you how I painted Anakin Skywalker for Star Wars Legion using mostly Citadel paints I think today, but we'll see. So without further ado, to start off this miniature I obviously built him, cleaned up the mould lines, and I've give him a nice undercoat all over using the Colourforge matte black rattle can, which as you can see is giving some lovely coverage. So without further ado, let us crack on, and the first thing I'm going to do is pop a light coat of Citadel base Rakarth flesh on Anakin's left hand, because that's his real hand, the other being prosthetic, and here's her face, which will give us a lovely base over this black to start the guy off. So we've got a blob on there on the wet palette, and we will just touch onto his hand and then the face with this Rakarth flesh. So I will Rakarth, is it Rakarth flesh? Yes, it is Rakarth flesh. I will get on with this and I will bring you back in just a moment. So there we are, all the skin parts on Anakin nicely covered with a nice even coat. It doesn't need to be super thick or super solid because we're going to go over it now with the Vallejo Express Color Dwarf Skin, which gave such a lovely effect on the Jyn Erso model from last week. And if you want to get some for yourself, it is 72.402. So we will put a drop of 2 of the dwarf skin onto our wet palette and straight in, maybe not quite that much on the brush, and we will go over the skin areas again, and this dwarf skin will now do the job that it was designed for, and shade give some nice effect to the miniature. And we will hit the bridge of the nose, touch on the brow, around the cheek, meeting under the eye and the cheekbone, again the point of the chin, point of the chin, and the cheeky bits, a little bit on the neck there, the other cheeky bit, following the jawline first, coming up to the cheekbone. Touch on the exposed neck there. And a similar job on his fingers and thumbs. So I will finish all these skin bits and bring you back in when I'm done. I think I'm happy with that highlight on the skin there. So the next stage will be to tackle Anakin's hair, for which I will be base coating with Citadel Colors Andrew Dust, and then over the top with Vallejo Express Color Wasteland Brown, which is 72.420 if you wish to buy your own. So, first off, we will get a little bit of Xandri dust on the palette. We've got enough on there to do the job, not so much that we're wasting our bottle paint. Talking about wasting half a bottle paint, how badly that Rakarth flesh is separated in such a short period of time. Absolutely diabolical. Would expect better from a company that's been making paint for over 40 years now. Anyway, we will get this Xandri dust on here, being very careful not to get any on the flesh, but as ever, if we do, it is a fairly simple job to touch it up later. Now that we've got this hair done and our miniatures now actually starting to look a little bit more like a person, it's time to hopefully not faff it all up and put on our coat of Wasteland Brown over the Xandri dust on his hair to give that lovely dark brown hair effect. So again, we put a few drops of Wasteland Brown on the wet palette, and or more than was, trying not to make a faff, we will get a coat of this Wasteland Brown all over the Xandri dust. Be careful again not to get any on the skin if we possibly can. And I will probably do the trick I showed previously. We put a small dab of Wasteland Brown into the eye sockets because I can't paint eyeballs. There we go, face and hair complete, and his hand. It's now time to move on to the undertunic. Now, a lot of people, a lot of other videographers and tutorial makers and such have gone for browns for Anakin, but I'm going to try for much more Clone Wars cartoon look, where I'm going to go for a sort of a magenta undertunic with black over the top. And to start this off, I'm going to be using Citadel Colour Scream of Pink base paint all over the undertunic, and well, we'll see where this leads us. This is a lovely rich magenta colour. We'll get a reasonable bit onto our palette, and for those that are interested, I have been using the Army Painter Wargamer character brush for everything so far, which is a reasonable sized brush, and I would say around the same size as a Citadel small layer brush. So let's get this all over the undertunic, and we'll see what sort of effect we get with this lovely deep magenta colour. And there we have the undershirt done. I think you'll agree that that Scream of Pink is absolutely lovely, vibrant colour. I must find more excuses to use it. So I think, well, I know that this is going to need shade, and I have two choices. I have Cardinal Purple from Express Colour, and I also have Velvet Red from the Vallejo Express Colour. Now, this is the Cardinal Purple. This is the Velvet Red. I think if I was doing a base coat, I would go for this one. I think for the shade, we'll go for the Velvet Red and see how they finish. So I've got a blob of each on my wet palette. So taking the Velvet Red, we will start blocking in the colour again. This will deepen down this magenta and give it a much more burgundy effect, which is ultimately what we want for Anakin's tunic. With that burgundy undershirt nicely base coated and shaded now, I think it's time to put a small highlight on some of the edges and tips, and for this we will be using Citadel colour Corn Red, which is a kind of burgundy colour. Hopefully it will be pale enough to show as a highlight on what we already have, so we'll get a little bit on our wet palette. Because it's a base coat, we will thin it down just a touch with water just to get that kind of consistency. So, moving in, clean brush off first, but moving in carefully, what we will do is hit areas like edge of the sleeve, a bit of a highlight, using the side of the brush where possible, and if not, if you can't use the side of the brush, use the tip in a vertical motion, or as much of a vertical motion as you can, to help prevent slips and errors. Sorry for keeping knocking the camera there. So one on these cloth ridges. Okay, I think that the highlight with the Mephiston Red has taken very well and given us a little bit more brightness, a little bit more pop, a little bit more punch. So now what we will do is the sort of overrobe here, which we will want to at first give a coat of Citadel Corvus Black to give us that nice sort of off black, very, very dark grey drab colour. And then we will do the trousers, for which I will probably go for, if I can actually find the paint, is it in there? Oh, there it is. Alright, which I will go for Citadel Contrast Black Legion, because it's a true black and it will probably give the best coverage of any black I've ever used. And that will leave, and I will do that on the trousers and his belt, probably his glove. And I will bring you back in when we've done that and decided what we're going to do to move on towards completion. So first off, we will get a blob of this Corvus Black on our wet palette. A decent lump because painting a decently sized area. And then we will, because this is quite a damp area of my wet palette, there is no need to thin this down, in case anyone was wondering why I tend not to thin down while using the wet palette. There's a little bit too much paint on that brush though. There we go, that's better. So we'll come in here and being careful not to get anywhere in areas we don't want it, we will coat Anakin's robe with Corvus Black. So there we have the upper tunic done, the more robe area with the Corvus Black, which is a very dark grey rather than a black. So now it's time to do the glove hand, his belt, and what I'm going to decide are going to be leather leggings with Citadel Contrast Black Legion straight from the pot, and this should give a very different shade than the tunic, because we'll see this more when I do something like Count Dooku, who is all black, or Vader, who again is all black. But if you use different kinds of black paint, so this kind I've used a very dark grey and true black, and for others I may use a very dark indigo black, like the Black Lotus from Vallejo Express Colour. Will give a much richer effect than effectively just loshing a little black paint onto your miniature, which will not give you an effect that you want. It will not be interesting, and well, honestly, it just won't look good. Now that Black Templar and the Eshin Grey have both had time to dry properly, it is time to decide whether we're going to do a shade wash, which I don't think is going to be necessary. And then, well, we've already decided that. It's time to put a highlight on, so we're going to start off with the tunic, and we're going to put on the high points and edges a layer of Citadel Colour Eshin Grey, which is a very dark grey and works well for areas such as this. Get a reasonable blob on the old wet palette. Just brush for control, making sure we're still at a nice point. We will come in, and areas like this we will come down here and then onto the edges where they look like they need it. And there we have the Eshin Grey highlight done, which again is very subtle, so I think I will do a lesser highlight using Citadel Base Mechanicus Standard Grey. But first off, we will go for the trousers and gloves and belt, for which I'm going to be using Citadel Cancel Blue as the highlight. And this is for two reasons. One is so that it doesn't just bleed into the tunic, and two, because these I've decided are leather, and they're going to be the leather of some Star Wars beastie, let's go for a blue black, which is a nice change. So as before, what we do is we pick out the very upper edges around the bottom, and very carefully just picking out the very edges, because we don't want a massive, basically what we don't want to do is change this black into a blue. So it's a small highlight here and there, just dabs and spots, dabs and spots. As we race closer to the finish with this miniature, it's time to paint the boots. And for this I've chosen a brown tone for the boots, and we're going to start with a coat of Citadel Base Mornfang Brown, which is quite thick, so we will definitely be adding a drop of water or two to this. So let's say that's up with that much. Test. I think that's better. So we'll start blocking in everything that looks like a boot. With a nice solid coat on the boots, it's time to give them some shade, and to do this I'll be giving them a wash of Vallejo Game Color Wash Umber. And if you don't have this one, Agarax Earthshade or any other dark brown wash or ink will do a similar job. So we get a little bit on the wet palette and then just liberally coat it all over the boots. Now that we've got those boots highlighted, it's time to start the saber dance. To begin with, what we'll do is the surprise move and put a blob of Pro Acryl bold titanium white onto our wet palette. This stuff is getting, there we go. Honestly, I think this is probably the best white paint on the market. If you are in the market for white paint, Pro Acryl bold titanium white, it's amazeballs. Anyway, to give us a nice base and something to work off for the blade of the saber, we're going to give it a nice even coat of bold titanium white. Because if you're going to have a laser sword, we'll have a shiny white one. No, we're going to have a blue one because that's the colour it's supposed to be. So, a nice even coat of the bold titanium white on there before we start on the metallics for the saber hilt and some other odds and sods around the miniature. So that can sit there for a moment, and we will be using Citadel Colour Ironbreaker because it's a mid-range silvery colour. It's not too dark, it's not too shiny, and it will do to start these bits off. So what we will do is we will paint pretty much the whole of the handle of the saber with this paint, and then pick out some extra areas like this on his tool belt, which I think could do with some metallic on, like the buckle here. Let's have a shiny silver metallic buckle on our belt. Now with that silver added, the metallic's done, we have a few spots of shiny, but unfortunately on the saber hilt it looks a little flat and we're not seeing the detail anymore. So to fix that, we will get Citadel Shade and Lull Oil, or Instant Skill as a lot of people call it. We'll just put a bob on to pick up those shady details, whilst the silver is still a little wet, so that should blend it nicely. And now it's time for the part that I always dread a little bit, painting the lightsaber blade. Now, because it's kind of difficult, I'll show you as we go on. So, to start off with, I will take some Citadel Altdorf Guard Blue and get it on my palette, and we will mix it with quite a lot of water. To get it into semi-glazed consistency. Let's try that. What does that like? Okay, that looks about right. So, starting at the base of the blade, nearest the hilt, and working up, we will put a coat of the Altdorf Blue all over. And as soon as that's dry, we will take another lot and, moving slightly away from the hilt, give it another coat, leaving that first part of the blade untouched with the second coat. This will help give it a gradiated effect, starting kind of pale towards the base of the hilt and moving stronger colour as we move up the hilt. And now third coat, again a little bit further up the hilt, of the blade, and as you can see now, the colour is shifting, becoming richer and darker towards the tip of the blade, and paler and more translucent towards the hilt. So I will carry on with this many times more. Now that we have a nice gradient on the blade, what we're going to do is, well, kind of my favourite bit, which is the object source lighting. So this is a light source, and certain parts of Anakin are going to have light reflected off him. Now, there are certain rules with OSL, call them Waylander's rules of OSL. Light travels in straight lines, so we won't see any behind his hand here because the light won't hit there. Shiny leather is, well, shinier than dull cloth, so we'll get more OSL on the glove, maybe the belt, than we do on the jerkin and overrobe. And the third and final rule is, because of the way light works, the reflection will be brighter nearer to the source. It is known as the inverse square rule, and basically it means that if it's brightness 1 here at twice the distance, it will only be brightness 0.25, so a quarter as bright. We start as usual with our Army Painter Masterclass miniature dry brush, because it's quite a small area and we want a bit of control. We've already wet our brush, got most of the excess moisture off, and it's now pretty much just moist, so it's leaving my skin cool but not wet. So we'll take a little bit of this Altdorf blue, work a great deal of it off onto our texture palette. And if you want to know why we use the texture palette instead of tissue, check out the Flame and OSL video or the dry brushing video in the Skills to Scale playlist. So, moving here on the glove, we will give a bit of blue, a little bit of blue on tunic and robe, a little bit of blue on the belt there, and the lower parts of the tunic and robe, but less than we put up here. What we're trying to do is give the impression of a reflection without obscuring the colour below. Maybe a touch on his boot here. Again, not too much. And because I like my OSL kind of subtle, I'll give that a quick touch with my thumb. So without obscuring the colour below, you can still see the magenta of the robe. We have a reflection of the lightsaber blade up his sleeve, on his tunic, glove, belt, robe, boot, and I think I will work off a little bit more paint because it's much further away now. So about that much, and if we look at the straight line, it would hit slightly on the back of the head there. So ever so slightly, but not on the face. And again, this hair's not that reflective, we use thumb to blend it in a little. We have some object source lighting showing on the hair and the clothing from the blade, and I am going to call that finished. So I'm going to base this guy up. I'll just base him up and I'll tell you how I did it rather than show you, and we'll talk about it in a moment or two. So I'll get back to you in a moment or two. Now that Anakin's all finished, I suppose the first thing I ought to do is apologise for the sheer length of this video. It must be nearly a week long by now. Anyway, I said I'd tell you what I did for the base. in this stage. So the paints at the top are what I painted the base with, which is technical Sterling Mud and Battle Maya, with a wash of Agarax Earthshade over the top. Then I dry brushed with Dryad Bark, Mornfang Brown and Balog Brown to give the effect on the top of the base there. Slapped a couple of grass tufts on, which I think are from the army painter this time, rather than Citadel. I'll probably get some Gamers Grass plants as well on there, well, at least one. But there we go, Anakin Skywalker, all done and dusted. This is how I painted it, and this is definitely how the method I suggest that you use if you're going to paint one for yourself. If you're still here, I'm amazed, and I love you very much. Thank you for staying till the end. I hope you've learnt something. I hope this was as much fun to watch as it was to paint. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Do all the wonderful social media things with my content. I love your faces, and goodbye.